again, welcome to the Laughter Crafter. It's really good to be with you again. Well, you may remember last week I tackled some calligraphy from a lovely piece of poetry by Omar Khayyam. It was a big project. It was in two parts. The first part was doing that decorative painting surface on that wooden panel, which I crackled with paint underneath, and that was quite effective. And then last week I did the calligraphy on top, which was quite a challenge because that crackled surface was really lumpy and bumpy. But I think the finished project turned out really well. It's quite large, and even though my place is chock full of art and craft, I found a place to hang that. It's in my therapy room, and it's going to just look fantastic in there. So this week is something a lot smaller in size, and here it is. A tiny little picture that I have done watercolor, just splashing around, nothing particularly artistic about what I did up the top here. And then I just glued on some little strips of colored card, even a little piece of paper bark that I've been using to do some paper bark art on. That's hard to say. Underneath that, I've got some handmade paper that you may remember I made handmade paper ages ago. So that's on there as well. And then on top of that, I've just done some stitching, and I incorporated this little hand stitcher. It's battery operated, handheld, and it's great for traveling if you just ever, a hem comes down on your trousers or something, you just want something quick and easy to sew them up with. I bought this. It was not expensive. It cost me $20 and really simple to use, and so that's what I used on this to do the stitch lines. So there we go. If you don't have one of these, and maybe you don't, I don't know, or maybe you don't have a sewing machine, maybe you want to stitch on some stitches by hand, or maybe you don't want to do any stitching at all and you don't have to. But anyway, that's the finished product. And this is actually another part one of a two-part project. And next week I'm going to show you the framing side of it, and we'll put it together. There is a sneak preview of the frame I'm going to use. When you get to the end of today's video, you'll see the frame I'm going to frame this in. It's actually got a circular hole. And so there's three little tiny birds there, just inside the hole. Yeah, so there we go. Well, here's the limerick that goes with this little project. Now, don't let this fill you with dread. It's just paper that's stitched with some thread. Some water-based paint daubed with little restraint. So what's stopping you, crafter? She said. There we go. Okay, a little joke for you now. Did you hear about the woman who got kicked out of mime school? It was something she said. Oh, it's good to laugh at your own jokes because nobody else probably does. Anyway, why don't we get on with this little craft? So these are the bits and pieces I think I'm going to use for this little watercolor and scrap paper picture. I've cut out a piece of 200 GSM watercolor paper. GSM, if you don't know, stands for grams per square meter. That's probably the minimum weight of card I would use to do a watercolor. Anything less than 220 GSM is not really robust enough to hold the water and keep its solid shape. So sometimes some of my papers are up to 330 GSM, and they're really thick. You could stand them up on their own. Anyway, the hole, it's a circular frame that I've made, and the hole is around about that size. So I've given a good margin, and I'm going to probably do watercolor at the top half and use these little colored strips down the bottom that I've got here. I'm going to tear those and attach those. A couple of colored pieces of handmade paper, and you remember when I made handmade paper earlier in the year. So that's from that stash, a sort of a bluey and a greeny one. I've got an actual piece of paper bark here. I've been doing paper bark pictures, sketches on them, so I might incorporate that. These are just from my cardstock, just card paper, not cardboard like for watercolor paper. Watercolor pictures, get that right. Okay, so the watercolors that I'm going to use are these lovely watercolor pens. I've got a whole gorgeous packet of them, some beautiful colors, but I'm just going to blend these four colors, 3 blues and a yellow, and try and graduate a sky at the top of this picture. And for the watercolor, I'm going to use a brush and wet the top part of the sky and dip those brushes into the water and make it nice and watery. Then I'm going to come back with a scrunched up tissue and remove some of that paint, just to sort of maybe give a more of a realistic sky effect. Sometimes when you do that, you end up sort of with cloudy effects. So we'll see what happens with that. I like using a dry tissue to take away some of the paint when I'm working with watercolors. The strips I talked about before, I've got an assortment here, and I'm going to tear those and layer them and attach them onto the paper. Ooh, it's a barrel of monkeys. Attach them onto the paper with paper clips. And I've got scissors, of course, which I used when I cut these strips up. So I think that's everything, and I think we're ready to get on now with the watercolor part. One more thing that I'm going to use to finish off this picture is once all of the little paper pieces are in position down the bottom, I'm going to use this little handheld sewing machine to stitch them into place, just to give an interesting texture. This cost me $20 from a fabric and craft store, very famous one called Spotlight. But other brands are available and you can surely get them online. I thought $20 was pretty good to have something for craft and also something to maybe travel with to do hem repairs and that sort of thing. So there you go, my little handheld battery operated stitcher. So I may use this little marker pen to mark on some little features, perhaps some trees along that top of the first ridge of paper, or I may do some birds in the sky. Anyway, I'll have this just in case I want it. So now I'm just dabbing my brush into the water and running it over the paper just to make it damp. Probably go just below the halfway mark, like that. That's nice and wet. I'm going to start with my grey, I think. This is a grey colour, I don't know if you can see that. And dipping it into the water, and you can see immediately it sort of starts to bleed. That's because I've added water. Pop that one away, go to the next darkest colour, which is this denim-y blue colour, dip that in. And this doesn't really take any artistic expertise, it's really just me rubbing backwards and forwards. Now if you don't have these pens, that's okay, you can pick up really, really cheap sets of watercolour, tubes of watercolour paint, just for beginners or even for children, very, very cheaply, and you can squeeze a little bit of the colour onto a palette, or a plastic lid or something to be a palette, and brush that. You don't need to have a fancy pen. I just find these are really convenient for when I'm out and about. If I go to the park or something with some watercolor paper and pencil and my beautiful battery operated eraser that I showed you last week, I find that these are just convenient, so I don't have to worry about don't have to worry too much about sort of a palette and that sort of thing. Now I'm just splashing on, you can see what I'm doing there with the brush, splashing on some dots just because I felt like it. Now I'm going to come back with this scrunched up and make it really scrunchy so you've got lots of wrinkles in it, and I'm going to remove some of that. Yeah, that's okay. Do a little bit more splashing. I'm not too thrilled about the yellow, so I'm just going to put some more yellow water on top of that yellow and get rid of some of it. There you go, it's quite pale now. I might even come back in with a little bit of yellow going up into here, just to blend it a little bit more. It looks pretty stark between the yellow and the blue, so I just want to sort of blend that a little bit more. And I know that yellow and blue make green, but you know what? I'm going to go with it. Let's see what happens. And it's a little bit more blending. Okay, I quite like that. So the next part will be putting strips of paper across here, and they'll probably come up to about here and cover some of that yellow up anyway. So there we go, that is the first part done. We wait for that to dry. You can see that the paper is held up really well, considering I did splash quite a bit of water on that. So that's fine. What I will do when the piece is completely finished, if it's kind of wrinkly like that, I'll press it. I'll put it under, well, we don't have big phone books anymore, do we? But we have plenty of other things that are the equivalent weight. So we'll see how we go. We're going to let that dry, and then we'll tackle the paper part. So here's the little watercolor that we did the other day, and it's all dry and it's looking nice, and you can still see the outline of the pencil, the circle that's done in pencil. You can still see that there. So we're going to have to make sure that all the strips of card that we glue on extend past that circle. So I've got my blue stick here, glue stick. Anyway, I've got this. And here's my little piece of paper bark from a paper bark tree. And I'm just going to run the glue stick across there like that. And there we go. What I love about the rough nature of this bark and the ripping of the card is that we get this lovely wobbly line which sort of imitates an horizon, so I like it. Now next to go on is this little piece of handmade paper that I made. It's a very pale green, and what I love about this once again is those fuzzy edges against that dark brown suggests again perhaps a tree line or whatever you want it to be. So there we go. It's got a straight edge and a fuzzy edge. The fuzzy edge is the leading edge that we're going to make sure is what is visible, and that straight edge is going to be hidden by the next piece that goes on, which is going to be this piece here, which again, it is kind of, it's paper, but it looks like wood bark. So I think I'm going to put this one on next. And take it right to the side, left-hand side of that paper, and you'll see it's a bit short on this right-hand side, but that's okay, because the next one that I come along with is going to cover up that little bit that's short. And I can even put it up there like that on an angle, because that bottom edge is going to be covered over. So that's fine. I'm going to come along with this sort of mauvey, bluey one. And once again, those ends are extending to the edge of that paper, and of course that edge is going to be hidden when the whole picture is inside the frame with the circular hole in it, which I made at the shed. And so this is the bottom edge like that. And the circle that I penciled is just inside that line, and the circle that I penciled actually was a good margin away from where the actual hole is. So the hole is around about there, well and truly inside that pencil line. So I'm not at all worried that that is going to be a problem. So there we go. And I'm quite happy with that. So what I'll do, just to keep these edges down, holding down really well onto the backing paper, and the glue really starting to work, is I'll just shove some paper clips on the edge. Seeing I have them, I may as well use them. Why do they do this funny barrel of monkey thing? There we go. Stop it. Right, okay. Tuck that in there like that. Pop that in there. One more down the bottom, I think. One more up here. Just to hold that bulky piece on. And there we go. There we go. It's just holding everything quite nicely, and now we'll just wait for that glue to dry. So here's the finished little picture. I'm going to take off these paper clips now, and I'm going to have a go at putting some lines of stitching in with my little battery operated handheld sewing machine. So I've only just recently bought this, and I thought this would be a good thing to try it out on. So I lift up that little presser foot there, that's a little manual operated one, and pop that under there. And if you're using this, I've sort of read up on how to do it. You've got to start on the left hand side of your piece of work that you're hemming, or in this case, you know, putting stitches across, and then you're going to pull out towards the left so that the stitches go off to the right. So here we go. And that's it. How does that look? Pretty good? Great. I will just lift up the needle. That lifts up the needle, lift up the presser foot, and I need to actually get myself a pair of scissors or something pointy to drag out a few centimeters of that thread, because that's what it needs apparently. And I can cut that with Emma's scissors. Okay, I'm going to do another little row, so let's make sure that's wound up. Lift up the presser foot. This hasn't got a very deep throat, it only goes back to about there, so I can probably only go up to about halfway through all of these lines. And if I wanted to carry on with the stitching, I could jump on a real sewing machine and do that. So here we go with another line. Make it fairly wobbly. Just has one speed, but there it is. Make sure that needle is wound up as high as it will go. Lift up the presser foot and cut that thread again. And now I'm going to have another go. Tuck this under here a little bit more, lift up the presser foot and start about here. And here we go. And I'm just turning the card as I go to give it that little bit of a wobble. Wind up the needle again, lift up the presser foot. So that's looking quite good. I've got 3 lines there. So here's the picture with all the stitches across the layers down there, and I think that's quite pleasing. So I'm going to take my little marker pen now, and I've measured where the whole of the frame comes to, and it actually blocks out a lot of that grey. So I'm going to just mark in a couple of simple little seagulls, or, you know, whatever birds you want them to be. Three will do. There we go. So that's it. So, spoiler alert, this is part 1 of a 2-part project, and this is one of the frames that I made at my little woodworking place. And part 2 of this project is going to be decorating this frame ready for this picture. So this is how it's going to sit. Where's our little birds? There they are. This is how it's going to sit in the frame next week. Now I'm looking at this upside down, so I can't tell if that's straight. But there you go. That's what it's going to sit in there like. So all of those edges are covered up, and I think that's going to look quite nice in there. I am going to cover the back of this with card to keep all those edges protected, and dust and so on from getting into the back, and that's how it's going to be when it's done. So there we go. So there you go. What do you think? Do you think you could have a go at doing this week? It wasn't difficult at all, was it? And why don't you switch it up and do it your own way? Maybe different painted colours in the sky, maybe a sunset if you want to, different coloured papers. Experiment, have a go. And you may not have a frame with a round circle in it, as I'm going to use on this. You might just use a little square frame, and that's absolutely fine. Mix it up, do it your way. Whatever you do, get into some crafting, because it's great for your mental health, and it's just good fun to do. And in the meantime, keep on crafting and keep on laughing. And see you next time. Bye.